Well, great. I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm super excited today to host this webinar and share how Glean uses Strapi and Gatsby to make their website a high traffic machine. Really quick, some housekeeping. This will be recorded, and we will share the recording out afterwards. And as I already mentioned, please ask questions in the Q&A tab. We have an awesome crew to chat with you today. I'll introduce myself and let the others introduce themselves. Hello, my name's Jack. I'm the Senior Product Manager at Gatsby for our integrations team. So when you think of sourcing data with Gatsby, that's the team I work on. I'll hand it over to Daniel.
Thank you, Jack. I'm Daniel. I'm the Developer Relations Lead at Strapi. I manage everything developer relations, from video production, events like this, and content on our very lovely blog. So thanks for having me.
And you have the best lighting of anyone I've ever been on a webinar with.
Thank you. I'll take that.
Very on brand.
Put it on my resume.
Yes. Stephen?
Awesome. And I'm Stephen. I am one of the lead developers over here at Glean, and I oversee the website, or the technical part of the website at least.
Nice. Matt?
Yeah, hi, I'm Matt. I'm the web and SEO lead at Glean. So I work with Stephen. So I kind of oversee everything that goes on the website. I manage our SEO, and I also head up our web squad as well, who Stephen is part of.
That's awesome. Well, great. Let's dive in. So today we'll walk through a little bit about Gatsby. For those of you that are maybe still a little bit newer to Gatsby, we'll talk about Strapi. And we'll really spend the majority of our time hearing from the Glean folks, their journey to becoming Glean and about the site they built. We'll have a demo at the end about SEO and accessibility, and then we'll take questions. But definitely feel free to ask questions throughout. Let's dive in. So Gatsby is the front end built for the headless web. And more as we sort of narrow in Gatsby, we want Gatsby to be the best front end for your headless CMS. We want Gatsby to power the most content-rich websites on the internet. And why is Gatsby so great for this? Performance. Your website is served on highly available edge networks. And because it's completely statically generated, you get fantastic sub-second page loads. Security is fantastic. There's no server that your site requests need to reach out to load the page. Because of this static nature of being served on edge networks, your website's highly scalable and can handle spikes in traffic. And finally, you have incredible flexibility to bring in whatever services and CMSs you need side by side to build a great experience. And then finally, Gatsby helps developers be super productive with a great local dev environment and plugins that help them quickly scaffold functionality for their site. But what does this look like in practice? It usually starts with marketers and developers collaborating together to build out a CMS, and then the developer templating this in React. And then boom, you got a website. If only it was that easy. But that's kind of the overview of how people use Gatsby from the CMS to React all the way to the front end. But the architecture is a little bit more complicated than that. There's a few layers to Gatsby. It all starts with the core framework where you build your components, your templates, your routing. Then you layer in content from other services like Strapi, maybe Shopify or Airtable. And then finally, the best place to build and host your Gatsby sites in Gatsby Cloud, where you've optimized super fast builds, an incredible CMS preview experience for content editors. And really all together, you get the best front end for the headless web. The unique part, though, of Gatsby is our content layer. You can bring in services from any CMS, whether that's Strapi, Shopify, WordPress, or maybe other sources of data like Google Sheets or Airtable. It's incredibly easy to source from plugins. You don't have to learn each individual API for all these different platforms. You can update your site incrementally on Gatsby Cloud, and you can use this content anywhere on your site. It's pretty much a dream. Gatsby's built around static generation, but last year we added support for deferred static generation and server-side rendering to open up a little bit more flexibility, whether you're building web apps with Gatsby or more dynamic experiences with Gatsby. We still stay true to that high-performance framework, but you have a couple alternative rendering options. And then incremental builds make static generation possible at scale. And so when there's just a small data update to your site, only the pages that have changed are rebuilt. And then finally, Gatsby is one of the frameworks that's friendliest for image optimization and really makes sure that your images are cropped and processed in a very SEO friendly way. And then when you do want to add dynamic functionality, we have Gatsby functions there. So what does this look like in a Strapi-centric world? Where you're obviously combining your code and your components through the Gatsby framework, you're pulling in Strapi into the content layer. And maybe you're also pulling in other services, things like Shopify for e-commerce, Airtable or Segment for analytics, and then builds, preview, and hosting on Gatsby Cloud. So with that, we'll start the dive into Strapi, and I'll hand it over to Daniel.
Thank you, Jack. For those not familiar with Strapi, Strapi is the leading open source headless CMS, and that means we're making a lot of strides to make a great product for developers and content managers. But for those who don't know what a headless CMS is, I'll get a bit into that. Unlike traditional CMSs, with the headless CMS, we have our backend office where your content managers sort of like do all the content management tasks. They enter the content, you have review workflows, and all of that happens and is accessible via an API. With Strapi, we have both REST and GraphQL APIs. And then that way you can sort of consume all that data from that single source on multiple devices, be it on multiple front ends with things like Gatsby or Vue.js, or something like a mobile app with React Native, or a wearable, or practically anything that can make an HTTP call. And that's really the beauty of headless CMSs. But getting into more of like workflows, the thing with Strapi and how like the value that it adds is it makes content at the center of the sort of like development process. Traditionally, what we saw is you had this idea where you create the website and content really is an afterthought, and it doesn't do a great job of empowering people on different, sort of like aspects. Whereas you look at what's on your right, you have sort of like Strapi at the center, an analogy for sort of content. And in using Strapi, you can sort of like empower developers, empower the content managers, use something that works for them, as well as third-party contributors. I mean, besides all this I've mentioned, I really want to get into what makes Strapi really, really unique. One, it's open source. You can find all the code on GitHub under an MIT license. It is self-hosted, meaning if data sort of ownership is something that's super important for you, this is something that we provide out of the box. And then it's super customizable and extensible. One, through its plugin system, and two, through the way we sort of like handle being open source and, being self-hosted. You can make a lot of customization to the source code without actually sort of like changing too much and still having sort of the reliability that the whole system has. And what makes it better is it's 100% JavaScript. A lot of the modern front-end frameworks and a lot of modern tooling right now is really sort of like bolstered by Node.js and sort of like JavaScript. So it makes sense to have sort of like your full stack application or applications on a single language. And that's a big value point for a lot of people. Last but definitely not least, we've got a thriving community of people who share a lot of what they do, the customizations they make, the extensions they create, the plugins that we have, and it's really an all-round solution. So hopefully now you have a better idea of Strapi and how it works with Gatsby. And now I guess we're going to hear from the Glean folks about how they did that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Daniel. We'll hand it over to Stephen.
Awesome, thanks, Jack. So me and Matt are going to take you through our journey to becoming Glean. It's an interesting journey. It took 3 years for us to achieve 2 websites, a new product, and a rebrand. So before we get into that though, who are we? Who is Glean? So we were founded back in 2007 with the name Sonocent. We made note-taking software for people with disabilities, specifically students in university, so that they could get the best out of their education and help level the playing field there. Then roughly about in 2018, we started working on a new product, which we eventually called Glean. And last year, we were able to rebrand the entire company to be the name of our new product. Glean is effectively the same as our audio note taker product, which was a client-side app, your typical native affair, except this time it's running in the cloud. It's pretty awesome. However, in that journey to becoming Glean, one of our first steps was to have a look at our website and say goodbye to Sonocent. As you can see, this was our original website 4 years ago. However, it had some problems. It was complicated. It was over 600 pages in size. The pages didn't necessarily have the best content, and it wasn't very optimized for SEO. It was also externally managed, which wasn't fantastic. It meant that if we needed large changes, we were relying on another company to do them for us. It had terrible global performance. This was a time when we were trying to kind of break into the American market and help students over there. However, we were facing 20-second load times in the US, which wasn't acceptable. As you can see to the right there, I've got some of the kind of Web Vitals metrics for that website. Surprisingly, they're really good. I think that was a really good day for them. But as a result of all this, our marketing team started using Unbounce and other various page builders instead, which gave them the flexibility they needed to create the layouts and the content to help kind of work in the US market. So with that, we started looking for a new way to build a website, and we found Gatsby and wondered if Gatsby could help us correct for our old website. The great thing about Gatsby is it's React-based. Our engineering team that was working on Glean has a lot of experience in React. This allowed us to leverage that experience and quickly start building a website. Gatsby also promised to be really performant, and this was really important to us. As you could see before, our previous website wasn't great, and we were getting penalties for that in terms of SEO and user experience. But Gatsby also had great documentation, and this is fantastic when you're picking up a new framework and you know nothing about it. The more documentation there is and the more users that are using it means that you can very quickly get access to help when you need it and you're not stuck for too long. So that was great. Also, the plugins in Gatsby are fantastic. At the start, we didn't use them too much, but over the 3 years, we started pulling in more and more plugins, and they were essential for us to integrate with Strapi. And also even things like our HR platform for recruitment in a super easy way using source plugins. So with all that, we started working to say hello to our brand new website built with Gatsby, but not only a new website, awesome performance and great vitals. So as you can see here, we went straight up to 100% in terms of performance and SEO. This is amazing because at the time I didn't know anything about SEO. To get 100 out of 100, that's pretty cool. And this is following the typical kind of best practice that Gatsby sets aside for you. So you don't necessarily need to know everything at the start. So with that being said, we liked Gatsby so much that we did it again and we created a second website, this time for our brand new product, Glean, to start marketing that. However, this second website, as we started to become aware that the company is going to rebrand, we wanted to make this the home of Glean and pull in all of our web content to the one place. However, that brought up a large question. Is it scalable? It certainly is when it hits the client side via great performance. However, creating content at this time required a developer. If you had a spelling mistake that you needed to fix on a page, wow, that's going to be a very expensive spelling mistake. So with this, we realized we needed a CMS.
Yeah, cheers, Steve. So when we were looking at getting a CMS in, we worked on getting a bunch of requirements together, and this is some of the requirements that we put in place. So we wanted to give marketers independence. You know, the whole model of asking a developer for something as simple as like a text change or a spelling mistake to be fixed just wasn't sustainable or scalable for us. So we needed marketers to be able to just be self-sufficient, really. We also needed to reduce workload on developers. So when we created the web squad, originally, we just pinched a few developers from the product. So actually in creating the web squad and building the website, we were actually harming the development of our product. So we didn't want to take too much time away from the product. Building trust between marketing and development as well. So back in the old days, you know, marketing and development had very different priorities. So, you know, it could take like 2 or 3 times of asking to actually get something done on the website. Sorry, Steve. But no, it's not the case anymore. We also needed to be able to manage technical SEO elements too. So yeah, it's just really easily done through the user interface of a content management system. It's just quick and easy. And we also needed to bring all of our web content into one platform. So apparently, and this is the story that I've heard, one of the previous heads of marketing at Glean didn't believe in the concept of a website. So our content was just kind of scattered across the internet. So marketing, we're using things like page builders, and we had content on various domains and various subdomains. So we just wanted to bring all of our content into one platform so that we could start building authority on a single domain rather than trying to build authority over several different domains and subdomains.
And with that, we had a task at hand. we needed to find a CMS. Specifically a headless CMS. We're already using Gatsby at this point, and so it's better to double down on that data layer that Jack told you about earlier. However, there was lots of choice here. I remember looking at pages which let you compare hundreds of CMS's features together. So instead, we picked 3 of our favorite CMSs. We let our engineering team pick their favorite CMS, happened to be Netlify CMS, and we let our marketing team pick their favorite CMS. And then, which was Contentful. And since I was the one doing the testing, I thought I'd pick my favorite CMS as well and test that too. And I picked Strapi. Netlify was great. It worked great for the developers, but not so much for the marketing team. It also wasn't as flexible as we needed it to be. And the same was said for Contentful. It was a lovely experience and very polished. However, again, it wasn't as flexible as what we needed. However, Strapi was just right for us. It made the developers happy and it made marketing happy. And so our decision was made. We decided to double down on Strapi. But why Strapi specifically? What did it do best? So, as Daniel told you, Strapi is open source, and this is great. If I ever wanted to understand how Strapi was doing something, I can jump into their GitHub repo and have a little look around. This helps me be a little bit more self-sufficient with things, and is fantastic. Also, Strapi is very customizable. So you can customize things like validation really easily through the UI. Setting things like maximum and minimum values, setting regexes to validate data against. And that's great, but you also get a JavaScript API that you can code against. This is fantastic. We were able to utilize this to perform really complex validation that went across different content types. So this was exactly what we were after. Strapi also featured dynamic zones and components, which worked really well for our use case. As you can see, I've got a little screenshot here of some of the components that we offer on our page builder inside Strapi. Dynamic zones are effectively little slots which you can put one or more components into. In this case, as you can see here, you can put a content block in, followed by an embed, followed by some inquiry form. That's awesome. And we were able to leverage this to create a page builder, which worked quite nicely for us. Most of the pages on our website are now delivered through a page builder and accessible to marketing. Strapi also has permissions and roles built in, which was really cool for us. At the time, we were really interested in this. However, it turned out we weren't going to leverage it when we asked our marketing team. Glean's still a relatively small company, so we just decided that the marketing team could edit whatever they wanted. And that works for us now, but as we scale into the future, that won't work for us anymore. So it's really nice to know that we can grow back into that and start enabling some of those permissions when need be. But not only that, just like Daniel told you, Strapi has plugins, and that's really cool. But we've not leveraged a lot of them yet. I love the expansion and the scalability of that. Certainly in terms of Gatsby, we'd be able to leverage those plugins quite heavily. And so I'm looking forward to leveraging them a little bit more in the future. So with that said, we now had our solution. We were going to use Gatsby to build a blazing fast client site backed by scalable content and data coming from Strapi. So now all we had to think about was the things that mattered to us. What specific things were we going to build?
Cheers, Steve. Yeah, so we wanted to use reusable components. Both Gatsby and Strapi support these components, and there are a few factors in that. So we wanted to be able to maintain consistency and quality across the website. So we kind of baked in SEO and accessibility into everything that we created in the CMS. So we could give marketing and other people across the business the ability to kind of build flexible pages, but with our constraints set in place. So it's that perfect mix. We could make sure that SEO and accessibility were taken into account when we were actually building the components, and then marketing could actually use them quite flexibly to just make quite different looking pages. So we also wanted the ability to compose complex components from simpler ones as well. So I think it's just a reminder that we're always looking to iterate what we build on the website. Nothing is ever kind of finalized. We're always looking to improve where we can. And yeah, as I say, we wanted to give users the freedom to build quite flexible pages. Also, when you think of landing pages for like email campaigns or like PPC landing pages or just organic pages, they naturally look quite different. So we wanted to give marketing the ability to satisfy the user's needs for those types of pages. And also we wanted to increase confidence as well. So what we ended up with was just a handful of reusable components. So when we're training people how to use the CMS, they don't have to learn how to use loads and loads of different components. They can probably get away with learning, how to use 5 or 6 different components, and they can just reuse them for every page that they build. So actually the knowledge of the CMS and the website builds up really fast. And we also wanted to automate redirects as much as we could, which is something that we used both Strapi and Gatsby for again. So we wanted to put in place automatic redirects when content is renamed to just prevent 404s from appearing on the website. So if someone went into the CMS and they changed the URL slug on a piece of content, the CMS would detect this and it would put an automatic redirect in place. So it would go from the old URL to the new URL, and the user wouldn't have to do any manual work on this. We also wanted to manage our site-wide redirects as well. So things like non-trailing slash pages to trailing slash pages, www.pages to non-www.pages, and also HTTP to HTTPS. So they're all managed automatically across every page on the website. And if we didn't have those site-wide redirects in place, we would probably run into some duplicate content issues with Google, and our rankings would suffer as a result. But we also gave people the ability to add redirects manually to the CMS. So a use case for that might be, if we had an old product or an old package that we didn't really want to promote to people anymore. So we could get rid of that page from the website, and then we could manually input a redirect to our new package that we really wanted people to buy.
Pretty awesome. I'm very chuffed with what we did with the redirects. You'll get to see them later on. So another thing that was quite important to us was automated testing. Being an engineering team, it's quite important to release quality consistently. So we've got a Jenkins instance, which we use for our main product, which we leverage for the website. And as you can see at the bottom, this is one of the website build pipelines. It's quite important for us to have unit tests for both our React components in the Gatsby side, but also unit tests for our Strapi component, Strapi customizations on the Strapi side. That's really cool. That means Strapi is quite unit testable, which meant we could increase confidence in our changes to Strapi. We were quite confident that our change didn't break anything that we already had. We can also instantiate test instances of Strapi and our website. So when we make code changes as developers to either part, we can bring that up in its own standalone environment, which is actually what this build run at the bottom here is doing, where we can play with our change and offload, put data into it. In fact, our Strapi customization will generate some of that data for us automatically, which is pretty cool. And this again increases the confidence that our changes aren't going to break existing content. But not only that, you might see we've got a little accessibility and E2E stage in our pipeline there. So we use a tool called Pally, which is an automated accessibility testing tool. It can find simple accessibility problems. It's not going to find all of your problems, but might find some things that fall through the cracks. And it certainly worked for us. And we'd be able to hook this up with Slack. So when marketing put a page live and they've caused some sort of accessibility problem, then they get a notification in Slack. What's cool is we were able to also leverage some Gatsby plugins for this. So for example, we used Gatsby plugin sitemap to generate the sitemap. This is for SEO purposes, but we're also able to reuse that for Pally to tell what pages to scan. So a great example of Gatsby plugins coming in handy for random things you didn't think they would. We also have end-to-end tests using Cypress. This is something we started using less and less as our Strapi implementation started taking over our website, just generally because the flows inside the website were no longer owned by engineers, they were owned by marketing. Instead, we're going to repurpose Cypress to run screenshot tests for us. This allows us to test our CSS. If we've changed our CSS for a single page, then it's nice to know if that's affected other pages unintentionally. So this was important to us. Not only this, but for this website project, we wanted to have a play with progressive enhancement. You might have not heard of this before, but it's an engineering pattern, which is usually talked about in accessibility circles. And it's made easier and better by the static site generator nature of Gatsby. It can also be done with server-side rendering. Effectively, it's making your HTML functional before you're making your JavaScript. I've got a little diagram at the bottom of this slide here, which kind of gives you a little idea of what's going on. So we've got a little pyramid here, which reverse pyramid with HTML at the bottom. These are like your the tech stack that's running inside your page effectively. And HTML is quite simple, it's quite small, whereas web APIs at the top are much more complicated. You'll need unit tests for these just to make sure that everything's working correctly. Now, when we do progressive enhancement, we implement each of these stages individually. If you're not doing progressive enhancement, then you'll be doing the opposite, which is graceful degradation, where you build all of the functionality all at once. And if for any instance you don't have access to a web API that you require, you'll need to gracefully degrade and write a fallback. However, this might not always be graceful, and we've got an example for you later. Progressive enhancement saves us here. We've built from the bottom up. Our HTML is functional, our JavaScript is functional, our web APIs is functional. You remove any one of them and everything remains functional without any extra work. So this is generally fantastic for accessibility due to the fact that assistive users are more likely than others to switch off JavaScript to get rid of pop-ups and other things that might get in the way. But actually, personally, I think it's even better for SEO, mainly because Google will spider your website without JavaScript enabled initially. And this allows all of your content to be visible without the JavaScript. And also, this can generally help us make a simpler solution. Sometimes you might get up the stack to the JavaScript layer and realize you didn't need that web API like you thought you did. That's less work for you to do. So that was great. We were going to use this, and I'll give you a wee demo of this later on, actually, to see the effect it has on your website.
So what kind of results did we achieve? So I've split this down into internal results and external results as well. So internal results are things that we just noted within Glean itself. So first one was user adoption. So the marketing team are now upskilled on the CMS, and they frequently use it to make changes on the website and upload new content as well. And that means that most of our content is now in one place, which is, makes me happy as an SEO. The 10% of content that we haven't moved across yet is just because we've got product features in our website roadmap that we just haven't built yet. So things like downloadable content, which we can absolutely do in a CMS, but we just haven't got around to it yet. Quality control as well. So as I mentioned before, we kind of baked in a lot of accessibility UX SEO best practice when we were actually creating the reusable components in the CMS to be used. So that allows us to just be able to maintain those things a lot more easily. And we can also input metadata, canonical URLs, etc., directly through the CMS. Self-sufficiency as well. So we no longer rely on engineers to make changes to the website. So marketing or other people across the business can just jump into the CMS, make whatever changes they need, and they don't have to bug anyone else to do it. Thanks, Jack. And yeah, externally as well. So it's important to remember that this website was one piece in the jigsaw puzzle of an entire rebrand from Sonocent to Glean. So we can now ensure consistent branding across our entire digital presence. So not only our website, which is obviously most important to me, but also our social media accounts and other things like that. We can ensure really good site performance thanks to Gatsby. We can ensure fast load times, which obviously is beneficial for users, but also beneficial for when SEO spiders are crawling our website as well. And SEO visibility and organic traffic, which of course go hand in hand. So we actually maintained our visibility over the course of the migration, which is what you really want from a migration. You don't really expect to grow during a migration. It's just about maintaining what you have already. But fortunately, we were able to steadily grow our SEO visibility post-migration as well, which is a real sign of our success. And as I say, we were able to grow organic traffic by 60%, comparing it to pre-migration to post-migration as well. So yeah, another really good result for us. So yeah, what did our customers think? So we don't always get feedback from our customers or leads or prospects about our website. It's more the products that they're interested in. But I wanted to just pull out this one quote because it really validates all the work that we put into the website. This was from the district director for City Colleges of Chicago, and they said, "I had a look at your website before this call, and I have to say, even before looking at the product itself, I knew it was going to look great and be incredibly easy to use because your website is. And it's fantastic to see." So as I say, that was real validation for all the hard work that we put into the build of the website.
That's kind of feedback. Product sells itself. With that, we'll hand it back to Stephen for 2 demos.
Awesome, thank you, Jack. Our first demo today will be on progressive enhancement. So I'm going to show you the effects of that progressive enhancement has on your website. So here we go. So we've got 2 great examples of this on our website, or rather a great example and a terrible example. So if you go to our plans and pricing page, you'll see this lovely little tab panel here. We click the For Education tab and it does a lovely animation and slides across. This is great. It looks great for customers and prospects. However, Google doesn't really like this. When Google's going to spider our website, generally it'll do it twice, once with JavaScript and once without. So when it's spidering the website with JavaScript, Google's not going to click this For Education tab. So it's not actually going to see any of the content inside here. It's a bit of a black hole. Then what about if we switched JavaScript off and refresh the page here? So now, obviously, as a human, I cannot click this button anymore. There's no JavaScript running. But this is also another problem for SEO. Again, Google cannot see inside this For Education tab. Now, this is an effect of graceful degradation. When we were creating this component, we were following that pattern. We created it exactly as you see here. However, when it came to gracefully degrading, I looked at this. And with graceful degradation, your mind is already relatively narrowed. I looked at this and thought, how do I implement this without JavaScript in a way that Google can see? In reality, it can't be done. You can't have this tab switching around without JavaScript and the content of the page changing. So unfortunately, this is a SEO black hole on our website. So it's nice to keep around because it's good for an example. I refresh the page after enabling JavaScript and it goes back to normal. But again, big SEO hole. Not only this, but it could be a problem for people using assistive technology. As I mentioned, they might switch off JavaScript to avoid pop-ups and adverts on other pages. If they've done that, then they won't be able to use these tabs, even if we have marked them up correctly. So let's have a look at what progressive enhancement does for us. If we go to our students page and scroll down, we'll find this lovely little tab panel. So it works in pretty much the exact same way. This one actually has its content delivered from Strapi, which is pretty cool. But you might think it's got the same problem. With JavaScript enabled, Google's not going to click our Organize tab or Refine or Integrate. So it's not going to see any of the lovely content we've got for them inside those tabs. That's a problem. And again, with the accessibility users. However, if I disable JavaScript on this page, what do you expect to happen? So the cool thing about progressive enhancement is we've started at the bottom of the tech stack. How do you make a tab panel with just HTML? Well, what you do is you look at what the tab panel itself does. What is the purpose of this UI widget? The purpose is just to show categorized information. That's all it is really. And it shows it in a nice way. So if I refresh this without JavaScript, it continues to show categorized information. Our tabs have been replaced by a heading, capture, and then the tab content. If I scroll down, you'll see the next tab's heading is here and its content. All we've done here is switch from using some complex divs and whatnot to really simple H2 content, H2 content. It performs the exact same function, except now assistive users can see all of this content when they've disabled JavaScript, but also Google can now see all of this content. That's great. If you happen to have JavaScript enabled, then you'll get the lovely kind of tabby version of it. But if you do switch it off, then you're still good. So that's the cool thing that progressive enhancement can do for you. It's a very small change to the way you think about a problem when you initially go to attack it. But then by reorganizing the process you go through to develop it, it means that you've covered more cases than you otherwise would. So that's progressive enhancement for you. I think it's quite cool. And now I think we can move on to our second demo.
Yes, let's do it. We had a couple of redirects questions in the chat, so I'm excited to see what you have to show us.
So I shall switch tabs. So now I'm going to show you redirects in Strapi and how we've managed that, because I think it's pretty cool and they're also very safe. So this is a testing version of Strapi that I've got running. And we can see I'm in the content type builder here. And this is our redirect content type. So a redirect isn't too dissimilar to something like an event or a blog. We have 3 fields here. We've got a slug, which is like the source of the redirect, where you're coming from. The target, which is where you want the redirect to take the user, and the comment. So I think I said before, we had about 360 redirects on our old website. Unfortunately, half of them didn't work when we came to do the migration. We didn't know why they didn't work. If they needed to work, should we fix them? Should we delete them? Definitely put a comment field in here. It'll help you in the future. Future you will thank you. So let's have a look at these. Oh, what's more to mention is, thanks to Strapi being nice and configurable, I can put regexes in here to make sure that we're getting a valid path on a URL. I can set these to be required and a maximum, minimum lengths and make them unique. So this kind of shows some of the customization that we've got inside Strapi. That's fairly easy to add. But let's create some redirects. So I'm going to create some redirects that you wouldn't normally create all at once. But over the course of a few years, you might be likely to create these kinds of things. So I'm going to redirect page A to page B. Publish that. So I'm not going to show you the Gatsby side of this, but what would happen behind the scenes here is Strapi will tell Gatsby that there's a change, and Gatsby will rebuild our website and deploy this redirect using one of the, I forgot the name of the plugin now. It's an S3 deployment plugin though, and that will go up to Amazon S3 and be live on the website. So we've got a redirect here, great, from page A to page B. But let's say a year has passed. We no longer need page B. So we redirect it to page C. Now, we didn't know about page A, but what this is going to do in reality is create a redirection chain. This means that if you land on page A, then you'll be told to go to page B, and then you'll be told to go to page C. And in a worst case scenario, I think for us, our highest chain was 6 hops. So you had to go 6 different pages before you landed on your page. And if you've got to wait a second or two for a terrible performance website to give you those pages, that's going to hurt your user experience quite a lot. But because of our cool customization inside Strapi, when I click back, we'll see that actually that redirect we created earlier, page A to page B, Strapi has automatically seen that we've created a chain and it's resolved it for us. Instead of hopping over page B, it's decided to take both page A and page B to C. And I can do this again, so I can go page C goes to page B. And we can see that that also updates page A's redirect. So this keeps all the redirects happy and unchained. But we can do a lot worse with redirects. So let's take page D, back to page B. What this does is this creates a redirect loop. This is where if you landed on page A, you'd be taken to page D, which would take you back to page B, which would take you back to page D. And all of a sudden you're going in this massive loop. Your web browser is going to get really sad and you're going to get a nasty message. However, Strapi's got you covered, or our automation rather. As you can see, now all of our targets are for page B. Strapi has realized that page B was the last link in the hop before it started looping round. So it's made sure that page A now correctly goes to page B, and our page D goes to page B. So again, this is notice that we've got a loop which would be terrible for our user experience. White page isn't great, and it's fixed it for us automatically, and that's awesome. But the great thing about having automatic redirects, well, rather redirects that automatically manage themselves, is we can leverage that in things like our blogs. So I've got a testing blog here, and it lives on this slug test blog. But say I wanted to edit this to an epic blog. It's going to be an awesome blog, this one. And I go back to my redirects. So what we've done here is change the slug of the blog. This will redeploy the website. The blog will move to a different page. Anyone that had that blog bookmarked will now see a 404, and that's not a great experience. However, as we can see here, created automatically by Strapi, we have a redirect going from test blog back to epic blog. And this means that SEO won't be Google won't be unhappy. We've got no 404s, and users with bookmarked content will still be able to get to the content. But we can mess with this some more as well. So say changing the name here was a mistake. I didn't mean to call it epic blog. I'll call it test blog again and save that. This would cause a loop normally again, as we'll automatically create the redirect for you. But because we can detect those loops, as we can see, our redirect here has been updated. Now, the URL for the dodgy blog name has been changed back to test blog. And this means that if anyone did hit that blog while it had been renamed, they'll be taken back to the original version. And this goes across all of our content types. We can move events, resources, general pages, and we don't have to worry about having to handle redirects. Instead, they're kind of handled for us. But yeah, and this also kind of leverages the best of Gatsby and Strapi. There's a bit of Strapi automation in here. It's about 60 lines of code, believe it or not, to do all this. Not bad. Then there's also the Gatsby side, which queries Strapi to grab these redirects and then sends them off to S3. It also does some other processing on them to make sure that we've got trailing slashes, which I think Jack mentioned might be coming to a Gatsby near you. So we can delete that functionality, which would be nice. But yeah, thank you very much. That is the extent of my demos.
Thanks so much, Stephen. That is the redirect system of my dreams when I remember building WordPress sites a few years ago. Great. So now we'll take time for some questions and discussion from the audience. There's some questions from the start of the webinar, so we'll start with those and then kind of go through. The first question up, when will DSG be available to hosts other than Gatsby Cloud? So as Gatsby, we're focused on building obviously a really robust experience between Gatsby and Gatsby Cloud. I have heard through the grapevine that other popular Jamstack hosts are working on DSG. You'd have to reach out to them to hear more about what they're working on. Another question we got here earlier on was, what does Gatsby Cloud use for hosting? We've partnered with Fastly. They were one of the fastest CDNs that we tested when we were evaluating hosting providers. What type of DDoS protection do they offer? Included with Gatsby Cloud is some basic DDoS protections. Reach out to our solutions engineering team if you want more specifics on that, or if you want to upgrade to a more robust version of DDoS mitigation features. We have a couple questions here. I think this is mostly probably for the Glean folks. Was there any reason you didn't consider other CMSs like WordPress or Drupal?
It's an interesting one, actually. So we already had a WordPress blog prior to all this work. So probably should have mentioned that. As part of what Matt said, we had a very spread out web presence. We had our core website, but then we had unbounced pages, and our blog lived on WordPress at the time. The main reason we didn't go for WordPress was just looking for a new solution, which was kind of headless at the core. Well, I think WordPress does support headless now. About 3 years ago, I'm not so sure that was the case, but I could have been wrong. Effectively, we looked across a lot of websites, CMSs, and WordPress was one of them, but I thought Strapi too much for that.
Just from my perspective, having used WordPress a lot, having built-in regex for field validation and having components in the dynamic zones of Strapi out of the box without having to do too much PHP engineering is pretty incredible. So there's a question in the chat: if I have a website in WordPress, can I convert it to Gatsby? So you can bring your WordPress content to Gatsby. So search for Gatsby source Strapi on GitHub or Google, and you'll be able to find our WordPress integration. Another question for the Glean folks: do you have any advice for analytics or event tracking? Did you make any open source plugins in the process of rebuilding your site?
So I can start with this one, Steve, if you want to kind of chime in with anything. So I don't think we're kind of reinventing the wheel with analytics at the moment. We're just using Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics to monitor goals. We've only kind of set up a couple of goals at the moment, and it's just like your classic form fills. So when someone, creates a free trial or someone submits an inquiry form, but we are looking to expand that into other types of goals. I know marketing are really interested in being able to track user journeys better using Google Analytics. So, if we put up a lot of kind of like employer branding content, if you like, so things that prospective employees would find useful, we want to track how many clicks we can get from that kind of content through to the careers hub, for example. And we also might start tracking like people who watch like embedded videos on the site as well. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Steve.
No, I think you covered it quite nicely. Although just to note that we didn't actually use any plugins for this. I might check now and see if there is plugins though, because that would be pretty cool. And so we chucked our own script tags in there. Thanks.
Excuse me, I'm just getting over cough. Someone asked, are you using Markdown or the CK editor? I don't know what the CK editor is, but maybe you guys know from using Strapi.
I'm not entirely sure what the CK editor is. I know that Strapi's got a V4 that's come out. Unfortunately, we're not in V4 yet, but after all this, I think that's one of my priorities. At the moment, we're using Markdown. Strapi does provide a sort of WYSIWYG editor, kind of. You type in the Markdown, you can hit a preview button. And this seems to be okay for our marketing team. Although I have done a couple of kind of, this is how Markdown works sessions with them. But they seem to get the hang of it.
So this is actually a good segue. We had some questions earlier on about the CMS preview experience with Strapi. Do you have a preview set up with your Gatsby site?
So unfortunately, no. So when we adopted Gatsby, this was in the days before Gatsby Cloud and whatnot. So we're still on our old kind of self-hosted infrastructure. And one of my goals for this year, though, is to migrate to Gatsby v4 and also up to Gatsby Cloud. I've realized that as much as I enjoy playing with infrastructure, I don't have time for it these days. And so it's best just giving it to the people that are the masters of it.
I'm going to be doing a technical deep dive at GatsbyConf with fellow Gatsby engineer Catherine Beck, where we'll talk a lot about the improvements we've made to preview. And that's just a shameless plug, Stephen, for you to try out Gatsby Cloud. Sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Oh, cheers. No, sorry, Jack. Yeah, I was just going to add that I think a preview environment is like one of our most requested features from like within the business for marketers. Obviously, they come from like using a WordPress system where you can preview your content quite easily. So yeah, it's definitely something that's on our roadmap for this year.
Well, if you want any help getting started on Gatsby Cloud, I might know a few people. So awesome. Great. Are you exposing, another question, are you exposing SEO or accessibility scores to content authors?
So yeah, I can come in on this one. Steve, again, if you want to add anything on the end, feel free. Not at the moment, actually. So I think what you see from our website at the moment is very much like our MVP, as we call it. So it's our like minimum viable product. So we had quite narrow timescales to get the website live. So we sorted everything into like a must-have versus a nice-to-have. So we don't currently expose SEO or accessibility scores to content authors. However, what we'd like to do in the future is improve validation around a lot of the SEO elements and that you see in our CMS at the moment. So things like minimum character limits on title tags and meta descriptions, as well as like maximum character limits. So we do have those in place at the moment, but we just want to kind of tighten them up to make sure that things like title tags and meta descriptions are optimum for us. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that, Steve.
Yeah, so we do actually let you know about accessibility issues. So as I mentioned before, we have Pally, which runs across our website in a static format. When Pally fails, it might find things like images without alt text or something like that, which aren't marked as presentational images. Then it actually sends a message to Slack, to our website channel. And that way we can communicate with marketing that there's a problem with this page. However, sometimes that might have been a developer, in which case all of the pages have a problem and the Slack message is massive. So we do communicate some accessibility issues, but again, like I said, these are ones that are found through static analysis, so it won't find everything.
I want to add something to that. Actually, someone on our team has worked on a really cool SEO plugin that does exactly what the question just described. So if you install the plugin, you have a little button on the side that you click, and you have all these checks that you have. And if it's like red, it shows that this is not best practice for SEO. So you can sort of define those aspects. And then you also get like a nice preview for what a page would look like on Google. And you have like the meta description and the title and like images and whatnot. So yeah, once you do sort of get on V4, and you can try that out.
That's awesome. I'm even learning stuff in this webinar.
Yeah,
I'm very excited for like, at least for Glean, moving to Gatsby 4, Strapi 4, Gatsby Cloud, like it's all coming. And just, it was mentioned in the chat earlier, but just to reiterate, we're working with Strapi right now on a major upgrade for their new source plugin that'll support Strapi 4 and Gatsby 4, and we'll have more to share later this month. So I think one of the coolest parts about this build is the redirect system that you built in. We have a question from Rachel. Is your automatic redirect code open sourced? Is there any way anyone can reproduce the awesome redirect system that you built?
It's a great question. So actually one thing that I'm really keen about is maybe to try and play with Strapi plugins. So at the moment, unfortunately, it's not open source. But after this, I am planning to maybe see if we can share that out because I think it's quite cool.
Definitely. Awesome.
That would make a great plugin. Let's make it happen.
Let's do it after this.
Yeah.
Awesome. Could you talk more about, another question here, could you talk more about sort of your governance or process strategies for ensuring that components, the way they're used, are accessible and SEO friendly? Do you have a formal process for that, or is it more just, like the regex and the field enforcement that you talked about?
So that's a great question, actually. So there is a degree of testing for this. So certainly on the accessibility side, we've got an in-house kind of accessibility kind of expert in terms of testing. So some of our changes and larger components can be tested by him. And he'll be able to test it with a screen reader and various assistive technology. So, and this is great to let us be aware that we've got problems with our components and their accessibility. So certainly when we're creating an individual component, we've got that stuff checked off through part of our code review and PR process. However, on the SEO side, I'm not sure there's as much of a process there. I guess it's when we actually go to design the Strapi component, that's when Matt will be asked, like, what do you care about in this? Do you want this field to be required? What validations would you like? And on the SEO side, it's more validations that we're adding instead of testers testing things.
Yeah, so I was going to add something to that actually. So we've got kind of like a wide range of people with SEO experience at Glean. So there's some people who have just come straight out of uni and don't know the first thing about SEO. Some people who've done kind of bits of it before in previous jobs. Then people like me who comes from like an SEO background. So we're trying to, I guess, foster a culture of best practice here at Glean, which involves basically training people up on SEO and upskilling people, so that when the time comes and I kind of have to focus my attention on other things, I know that the SEO is taken care of and it's in good hands.
Fantastic. Stephen, you talked a little bit about progressive enhancement and CSS. Which method of CSS do you use? CSS modules, styled components, Sass?
Oh, so we're actually on Sass at the moment. I've always been a big fan of Sass, partially due to the name and also due to just Sass is a great language to use. And we also use CSS variables in that. So we've got a bit of a theming system inside our website, which if you go to our website, you'll notice it works in both dark mode and light mode. It's quite cool. That's fairly automatic for us, taken care of by our Sass. But we are going to be bringing in CSS modules as well to help out with that, just for a nice bit on top.
We have a couple questions here about performance. How do you avoid excessive DOM size and dealing with those sorts of issues around core web vitals?
Well, that's an interesting one. So I don't think we've got any concrete process in place to deal with really large DOM. So far, we've not noticed massive impact inside our website for this. For our main product, Glean, we have noticed that DOM size can get really quite large, especially when you're recording an event and you've taken lots of notes. In which case, we can start looking at things like virtual rendering. However, we've not done most of that yet. Tends to be that performance isn't too bad. But there are other things that we can make use of. So things like Gatsby image, well, lazy, actually, no, that won't affect your DOM performance. Never mind.
No worries. I was just curious. Someone asked a question where they said their page performance is degrading because they have a large page data.json file. Is there any way to decrease the size of it? What comes to mind for me is make your GraphQL query more specific, but do you all have any advice for them?
Oh, that's a good one, actually. I've not necessarily noticed the JSON files making the page size large. So generally, you should still be fine for your initial render, shouldn't you? Since that can be done with HTML alone, never mind the JavaScript. And it's when the React hydration comes along, that's when you'll start pulling those assets in. I've not specifically noticed that as a problem on our website, but I think what you said, Jack, there about kind of making your GraphQL queries a bit more specific might help with that.
Totally. We have another question here. How are you optimizing the implementation of Google Tag Manager? And what did you use to make that cool animation while switching tabs?
Oh, so actually we put Google Tag Manager in, but I don't think it's actually been used too much. And as for the switching tabs, that's just CSS wizardry, you know, looking at what sacrifice you've got to make to the CSS gods to make things look great. But that is definitely also helped by our kind of theming system that we've got.
Yeah, I don't think we've done like a whole load with Google Tag Manager yet. But yeah, I think like last year it was all about putting the foundations in place, and this year it's about actually growing the website. So, you know, if we did this webinar at the same time next year, I'd probably have a lot more to say.
So that is actually a great sort of final question I was going to ask. What is planned for 2022 for your Gatsby and Glean and Strapi site?
So I definitely have some technical plans. So being the tech lead of the website, some of my highest priorities are to get up to Gatsby v4 and get Gatsby Cloud. That's something I'm really looking forward to. I mean, seeing those demos for like 2-second build times, that's crazy. We take 10 minutes to build. So Gatsby v4 and Gatsby Cloud are really high on my radar, along with the Strapi v4 upgrade. Other things would be around testing, like I mentioned, our screenshot testing. We'd like to get a bit more of that. We've had a couple of issues lately where we've changed a component and it's messed up a couple of pages and it takes you by surprise. I don't like surprises. So certainly in the technical landscape, it'll be Gatsby Cloud is kind of my main priority. But what about you, Matt? What features are you expecting us to build?
Yeah, cheers, Steve. Yeah, I was just checking our website roadmap there just to see what I could mention. Yeah, so I think my job is to kind of collate requirements from the rest of the business. So people like marketing, sales, etc., in terms of what they want to see in the website. So as I mentioned, I think one of the priorities we've got is to get that remaining 10% of content moved over to the CMS. So that involves building the ability to create downloadable content. So the marketing team might send out like an email campaign or a PPC campaign where the user can download something like a white paper if they fill in a form to give us their details, of course. So yeah, if we replicate that feature in the CMS, then we can move that kind of content over. Like Stephen mentioned, you know, quicker build times, which probably achieved by upgrading Gatsby. And then we've actually just put one new feature live, which is like improved blog authorship as well, which sounds really small, but it's just we have a lot of contributors to the blog from like education experts. So we can really kind of put their name and lights on a blog now, which makes contributions that much more likely. And I was just seeing if there's, yeah, so I was going to say, and also like, I guess strapifying other elements of our website as well. So things like the nav bar. So at the moment, we still have to go to engineers like Stephen, and I have to say, Stephen, please can you add this page to the top nav, please? And he says yes, but ask me twice more, and I might do it. No, he doesn't say that. But but obviously, if we obviously when we build that in Strapi, we're just giving marketers the ability to just self-serve that. And again, just like reducing that reliance on engineers to make changes for us.
Awesome. Well, we are at time. I've had such a fantastic conversation today. Daniel, is there anything else you wanted to add from the Strapi side?
Yeah, check out our Strapi Conf if you want to find out more things about Strapi and how to use Strapi with a lot of other tools. We're running our user conference March 16th, 17th. I'll share a link. And I think Gatsby has one, and I'll be giving a workshop on Gatsby and Strapi. So you should check that out also if you want to get up to speed with Gatsby and Strapi.
It'll be a busy month for Gatsby and Strapi both. Sounds like we've got conferences. So
absolutely.
Well, awesome. Thanks so much, everyone, and we'll catch you later.
Everyone, see you later.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.